Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lunch Lab today. I am Sally Delisle, co-owner and director of trainings at Childlight Education Company. Our mission is providing wellness education to create happy, healthy, and resilient youth and families. Today, we are back with Lisa Stevens. Hi, Lisa.
Sally, how are you?
I am doing well. Thanks for coming back to talk to us about the business of bookkeeping.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes, absolutely. So this is part 4, and who knows, maybe there will be a part 5, but as of today, this may be the final part of this series.
It may be.
Maybe. So before we just hit record, Lisa and I were talking about our lunch, of course. It's
Yeah.
Lunch Lab, excuse me. And today, both Lisa and I had a Sammy,
Did.
and they were quite delicious. So I had a grilled cheese with avocado on gluten-free bread. It's a typical fall day here in Maine where I live. My gluten-free grilled cheese, I have to say, was super deluxe delicious, and we will probably be sharing the recipe with you if you would all like it. And Lisa, what did you have for lunch?
So I had a sandwich as well, and mine was also on gluten-free bread, and it was cauliflower breaded chicken, and it had a little spice with it, and I had some vegan cheese on top, some mayonnaise and pickles. It was
Sounds so
delicious.
good.
It was really good.
And all of you out there, of course, you don't have to do the gluten-free thing or the cauliflower thing. Those are just our dietary needs. You can tweak it any way you want. But I hope that you make yourself a delicious sandwich, pull up a chair, and hear what Lisa has to say today on the business of bookkeeping. So, Lisa, you have the floor or the screen.
Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so as Sally said, believe it or not, we have somehow made it to part 4 in the business of bookkeeping. So let's jump right in. So I always, in the beginning, like to do a little brief thing on myself for those who haven't seen the prior series. My name is Lisa Stevens, and I am the accounting manager for Childlight Education Company. I have been with Childlight since 2018 and have been a bookkeeper since 2016. I always like to clarify that I am not a CPA and that any tax related questions should be directed to your CPA or tax advisor. In this video, we will be discussing accounting software. Childlight utilizes QuickBooks for our accounting needs. However, we are not advertising or promoting the use of QuickBooks expressly. You should choose whatever accounting software fits your personal needs. Let's run through a quick summary of what we discussed in part 3. So in part 3, we discussed why we need to know how to run financial reports in QuickBooks as an independent contractor or business owner, such as understanding your business's financial health, very, very important. Being able to provide reports to financial institutions and creating budgets. We discussed what reports we can run to help us understand the financial health of our business. There were 2 core reports that we discussed that are very, very helpful in this vein: the balance sheet report and the profit and loss report. We provided instructions for where we navigate in QuickBooks Online to run these reports and how we run them. We also discussed why these reports are helpful to the business owner. We discussed additional helpful resources such as advisors and SCORE. Okay, so here's our overview of part 4. Why do we need to know how to invoice for our sales and our services? How do we invoice for sales and services? What is our accounts receivable account and why is it important? How does invoicing tie into the accounts receivable balance? And what is an accounts receivable aging summary? So we're going to delve right in and we will answer all of these questions. Okay. So oftentimes you might hear someone say, well, why do we need to invoice? Why is that important? Why does someone need to know how to do that? So as a business owner, it is important that you invoice your clients to ensure that you get paid, right? So Sally, if you're teaching a yoga class and you finish, say you teach for a month, you teach twice a week, and if you don't invoice for those services, will you collect your money, right? A verbal agreement of payment for your products and services is not a practical method to collect what you are due. So Sally could say to her client customer, you owe me X amount of dollars at the end of our session. And the customer client nods yes, absolutely. But at the end of the session, if there's any issue in collecting that money, a verbal agreement isn't going to cut it, right? You need to have something on paper that shows what you're owed. So a formal invoice sent to a client or customer is an official record of what you provided and what your customer owes. So on that invoice, and we're going to see an actual invoice. But before we do that, on that invoice, we're going to see these are the services Sally provided, and this is what the customer owes for those services. Now, this also allows you to track who owes you. Okay, you have a record of who owes you for your services. So, invoicing clients helps a business owner to see what funds are expected and thereby assists in the financial management of your business. So, if you're invoicing your clients, you have something to look at to say, okay, so looking forward the next couple months, this is what I'm doing. These are the services I'm providing. And these are the funds that I expect to come in from these services, which is very helpful, knowing what you can afford, right? So very, very important that there is a record, and that's where the invoice comes in.
Lisa,
Yes.
so this is different than a contract with someone.
Yes.
So this can happen, especially where I live, where we have different seasons. We get a lot of snow sometimes.
Right.
So we may have this agreement to go and teach classes, but then a class gets snowed out. Or we agree on dates to teach classes and you go to teach, but they forget that there was a field trip. So the class is not there when you show up. So we would also want to have a contract in addition to sending an invoice.
Absolutely.
And that's a whole different conversation, right?
It is, but you make a great point. So I'm glad you brought that up, Sally, because it's important also for folks watching to know an invoice is not a legal agreement of payment. Okay, so that's where other steps come in, like a contract, like, you know. So that was great. Thanks for bringing that up, Sally.
Sure.
Okay. So I've had this question a lot, actually. So hopefully folks here today watching have this question. So how do we invoice for our sales and services? So we've got a little sample invoice that we can refer to here. And what we have on here are the main things that you need to have on your invoice that are going to be important. Okay. So up here, you've got your company, your address, phone number, and email. Okay. Important to have your contact information on there. If you send your invoice out and there are questions, but they can't reach you, that's going to hold up your payment longer. And we don't want to see that happening. Okay. A date. Okay. This is super duper important. You do need to have a date on your invoice. Um, when I think about dates in accounting, they're very important. So you need to have a date on your invoice. It's very helpful for your customer, and it's very helpful for you also when you refer back to your invoices. An invoice number. So here's another important one. And again, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You don't have to have, um, you know, 3 digits or, letters. You can do whatever works for you, whatever invoicing system works for you as far as the numbers. I encourage you to do it. Just something where you can keep a record of that invoice. Okay. The due date. So that's a really important one too, right? So if we send an invoice out, but we forget to put the due date, again, we might have questions from our customer. And it also lets them know your expectations, okay, as far as when you're expecting to be paid. And on here also, right, we're going to address this to your customer's address and their email. So in the body of the invoice, I always like to have the name, the date of the service or the sale. So say this is a service that we're talking about today, but it could also be, sales of products as well. So it could be either. So if it's the service, we definitely want to apply a date to the service. So when that service actually happened, okay? And then a short description of the service or the product if you're invoicing for a product. And then we need to have the cost, the amount. And also very important to have a remit to. So if you are expecting a check, please here put how you would like them to make the check out, the address it should be sent to, etc. And if you do not accept credit cards, you wouldn't need to do that, but you can also add that information in there as well if you did accept credit cards. So on the bottom, you could leave us a little space, and that's kind of where you might put other payment expectations, such as, if payment is not received by X date, there is a 1.5 late fee percentage added on, or whatever you would like to do in that vein. But this is sort of just a basic sample invoice, but it has all of the information that you need and that your customer needs. Okay, so thought it would be kind of neat if we took a look back in the past, okay? How did we invoice and organize our financials before we had accounting software? Well, we did it by hand, right, Sally? So if you look to the left, we've got a sample invoice here. And this would all be filled in by hand. The services would be written in, the total, everything. So all written in by hand here. Okay. And then either mailed to the customer, probably snail mailed to the customer, right? We weren't sending invoices by email, not at all. So there was definitely a lag time, right? And so you had to prepare the invoice, you have to send it out, then you would send it to the customer, and then the customer has to write the check, send it back to you. So you've got probably at least a 2-week period there. And then to the right, what did it look like? How were we keeping a register? How did we know what money was coming in and what was coming out, right? What was the balance of the bank account? Well, we used a general ledger. And Sally, I I don't know if you're familiar, but I remember the old, the notebooks. And those were great. We'd love to be able to do it on the computer, but it did the trick. So,
Yes, this
yeah,
is what I used.
yeah,
And if I was lucky, I received a check. It was oftentimes cash that went into a white envelope.
yes.
And then I drove to the bank and deposited it. This was my original system for
Yeah.
sure. Mhm. Yep, I still think I have this ledger somewhere.
Oh, that would
Would
be
be
so
fun to
fun
look
to
back on.
have.
Yep, this is the way it was done.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah. So anyway, just a quick little fun thing there. So speaking of accounting software, where do we navigate in QuickBooks Online to create and send an invoice? So for QuickBooks Online, you're going to navigate to the menu, which again is on the left side of your screen. You are going to click on Sales and then click on Invoices. And then you'll be able to select to create an invoice at that point. So once you're in the invoice template, okay, what happens next? So you have to complete all of the invoice fields. So the first thing you're going to do is select your customer. You will be prompted to enter the customer info if this is not a returning customer. So if you've already invoiced this customer, all the information is already in the system, very handy. You can click on their name and move forward to the next field. If not, very handily, they will allow you now to add in the customer, and you will want to make sure you add in all of the necessary information, their address, phone number, contact information, and such. Next, you're going to select your invoice terms, and you will create them, okay, as you'll create these as you're prompted. So, um, a common set of terms is 30 days. So say you want to create a set of terms for 30 days, you'll click down and it will give you the option to select that. So then you're going to select the invoice date. Okay, so you have to make sure that the date on the invoice is what you want it to be, right? And below that, they actually give you a spot where you can add a purchase order number if needed. Now, we haven't gotten into purchase orders, but oftentimes schools, companies will have to get a purchase order for a vendor when they are purchasing products or services. And oftentimes they will give that to you prior to payment. So when you are putting your invoice together, it's really important to add that purchase order number so that they can, their financial team will have that for reference. Okay, so now we're going to come into the body of the invoice. Okay, if this is a service, you are teaching a class, for instance, you would select the service date. Then you're going to select either the product or service that you're selling, add in your description, quantity for products, rate, and the amount will populate for that. Once you've put in the quantity and the rate, it will populate for you. If you use classes, for those who watched a couple episodes ago, if you use classes to track your different revenue streams, you select your class next. So if you remember, I'll very briefly, we use classes when we want to track different revenue streams, regular forms of revenue. We would use classes to track those. So when you add your class in, that's how QuickBooks knows that this revenue from this invoice goes to this class. So then at that point, you would add any necessary attachments. You might want to add your W-9. That would be a good time to do that. Then you're going to save and send your invoice. And that's it. Okay. So moving on, we're going to talk about what is our accounts receivable account and why is it important? So, accounts receivable. Your accounts receivable or AR account is an asset account on your balance sheet. Every invoice you create is automatically part of your accounts receivable. Okay, so that invoice we just created, it's already in our accounts receivable. Okay, it's ready to go, it's tracked. This is very helpful to the business owner in making informed decisions with knowledge of the amount of upcoming revenue. Okay, so if your accounts receivable, your asset account is holding um, the uh, the information of what you're owed, okay, and if you can pull a report to look at that, that's very helpful to know what's upcoming, possibly what's overdue, what's a future revenue that's coming in. So let's talk about that report. So the AR, accounts receivable, aging summary. This is a financial report that provides an aging summary of the business's account receivables. Okay. So the receivables, the invoices, okay, this is going to provide us an aging summary. Okay. So we'll be able to see, these are the invoices that are due now. These are the invoices that were due 30 days ago. So that's why this report is very important. This allows you to track what you are owed and also see an aging summary of your invoices. Okay, so payments that are due, just like I was just saying, or overdue, and the length of time that they might be overdue. So really easy to see that in that report. Again, allowing the business owner to make informed decisions for the business. Okay.
Lisa, I can see how that would be super helpful because you may or may not choose to work with those businesses again in the future,
Right. So,
or those people in the
right,
future.
absolutely. If you're not able to collect your money, it can cause a problem. So it's always helpful when we can see, okay, these people are chronically late. um, we either need to have a discussion to figure out how we can fix this, or maybe we need to part ways.
Or do they need just a longer time frame to pay, or do they need a payment plan, something else to support them on that,
Absolutely.
right? Okay.
Absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit more about the AR aging report. So just a short definition here. We've already talked about it a little. So this is a report that gives a business an overview of outstanding payments and how long they are past due. So if you want to pull up the aging report in QuickBooks, you're going to, again, navigate to the menu, that left side of the screen. You're going to click down to reports, and then you're going to click on favorites. And this is already listed. QuickBooks automatically lists this report here. That's how important it is. That's how many people use it. So that tells you something there. So you're going to click on the accounts receivable AR aging summary. Okay. This report is automatically going to generate for today's date. Okay. So it's showing you these numbers as of today. Okay. When you first pull it up. So it's showing you the balance due from your accounts receivable as of today. You can change the date to see what you were owed at a specific point in time. If you wanted to see what was I owed on the last day of the month last month, you can go ahead and pull that up. Okay. Okay. So when we're looking at that report, unpaid invoices will be listed in one of the following columns: current. So yes, of course, it's possible to have an unpaid invoice in current. Maybe it's not due yet. So it's going to be in current. Then there is options for the 1 to 30 day, the 31 to 60 day, 61 to 90 day, and the 91 day and over. So all of your invoices will fall into one of these categories. depending upon when they were or are due. Utilization of this report allows the business owner to follow up on unpaid invoices as is necessary. Okay, so sometimes you just might need to remind your customer that an invoice is due. Um, things sometimes go by the wayside. So just a friendly call or email to say, oh, just a reminder, this invoice is due. Now, QuickBooks will automatically send out reminders that invoices are due, and that's you can set that up to be done automatically, which that discussion is probably for a different day as far as how we do that. But that's very helpful because sometimes when folks haven't seen an invoice in a long time, they may have just forgotten. So just to give them a little heads up. Okay. So just a little wrap up of what we've discussed today. Today we discussed why we need to know how to invoice for our sales and services as an independent contractor business owner. We learned how to create an invoice as well as what information should be included on the invoice. We discussed the accounts receivable account and why this account is so important. We provided instructions for where to navigate in QuickBooks Online to run the AR aging report and how to run it. We also discussed why the AR aging report is helpful to the business owner in payment collection. So we just wanted to add a couple things at the bottom here. So there is, I think we discussed this in our last lab, Sally. There is free financial training available from SCORE. So there is a link here. We saw this, and this is a Beyond the Basics training. So maybe like after you've finished the lunch labs, you could maybe look at doing something like that, the Beyond the Basics, for a little bit more information to move ahead a little bit, learn some more things that are helpful. And then also, just a reminder, if you're interested in a mentorship, either with me or anyone on the CEC team, you can check us out at this link for all the information on that.
That was very helpful, Lisa, as always. Very informative. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate you. Is this it for the PowerPoint? Do you have more for us?
Oh, this is it. So I'll go ahead and close that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for spending so much time on this. If anyone out there has more questions on this topic, the business of bookkeeping, or you want to share your BBBQ, biggest burning bookkeeping question, Lisa will certainly pop back on to answer it or answer you directly. So head on over to childlighteducationcompany.com and send your questions there. And until next time, let's all do some good out there and go visit our YouTube channel to check out the other lunch labs. There are several others on there that are talking about lots of other topics as well. So Lisa, thank you again. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.